Vic, thank you very much, and it's my pleasure to introduce this part of the common session. Every year the Council of Lake Committees identifies a theme that they want to explore at the common session, and this year it's an environmental principles document. So what I'd like to do today is very briefly reflect on where we've been as fishery managers in general have struggled with this idea of habitat as it relates to fisheries. Talk a bit about the Joint Strategic Plan and the role that it's played in the Council's thinking about where to move forward, and then the opportunity for fishery managers to provide advice to what the environmental principles term as applicators through the environmental principles document. So, first of all, just a few fundamental things about that we here in this room as fishery managers all know to be true. We all recognize that good habitat is important for sustainable fish stocks. And it's also true that fishery managers do not directly regulate habitat in the same way that they regulate stocking or harvest or other things that they can directly control. As a result, there's a fundamental dilemma that how do fishery managers then influence decisions about habitat to benefit fish populations? So that's the real question that we've wrestled with for a long, long time. And in the past, we've done that through documents called environmental objectives. Lakes Michigan, Huron, and Erie have developed environmental objectives. The Fishery Commission, in its strategic vision from 2011 to 2020, noted that a vision might be to develop environmental objectives for the other two lakes, Lake Superior and Lake Ontario. Yet the reality is that those documents, although well conceived, have done this. They've sat on the bookshelves and not been really actively pursued. And so as a result of that, the Council of Lake Committees has thought hard about that, and it's come back to the basic principles of the guiding document that drives decision-making in cooperative fishery management, which is the Joint Strategic Plan. There are four basic principles there: consensus, accountability, sharing information, and ecosystem management, which I'm going to focus on here in the next slide or so. So within the Joint Strategic Plan, there are these things called ecosystem management strategic procedures. And right away it talks about environmental issues. And what the Joint Strategic Plan says is that the lake committees will identify environmental issues that may impede achievement of fish community objectives, and then it encourages the lake committees to work within governmental initiatives that provide opportunities essentially to achieve progress on those fish community objectives. So if we think about working within governmental initiatives, that could range from federal initiatives to state or provincial initiatives, all the way down to the local scale. And I think that's an important thing for us all to reflect on as we go forward. In addition, the Joint Strategic Plan talks about coordination with the Water Quality Agreement and the LAMPs, recognizing that lake committees, as they participate in the LAMP process, they should develop joint proposals that focus on identifying environmental needs relative to fish community objectives, also recognizing that that process helps to identify potential funding mechanisms that might include sources like the Great Lakes Fishery Trust, the Great Lakes Fishery and Ecosystem Restoration Act program administered by the Army Corps of Engineers, the Canada-Ontario Agreement, and the Upper Midwest and Great Lakes Landscape Conservation Cooperative. So the CLC reviewed this and said, well, we think we can work with that. And they deliberated for a period of 2 years. They did a lot of discussing. A key group of the CLC, Vic Santucci, who's moderating today's session, and Steve Hewitt, who you're going to hear from in a little bit, helped to draft the document. The CLC then did a series, again, of discussions and revisions over about 2 years. And the result of the document that they came up with leads us to several important principles or concepts that I'm only going to touch on, and which you're going to hear a lot more about in the next couple of talks. So things that are important to fishery managers as they think about habitat is recognizing that, first of all, there are a lot of information gaps. And as a result, this has to be a hypothesis testing and adaptive approach. It needs to be collaborative both among fishery managers and between fishery managers and those folks who have the ability to make changes with habitat. All of this happens slowly and at local scales, but it needs to be thought about in a cumulative context. The other thing that's important, again, from a fishery management perspective, is that there are functional habitats for fish, and we need to understand what those are, and that within those areas, there are priority areas for management to help restore habitat quality. It's also important that both fishery managers and the people that they're talking with understand and communicate the value of fisheries, both economically and ecologically, and to be able to focus action on those stresses that are manageable. So you're going to see and hear a lot more about that, but that's just a quick overview for you. So the result then is this document, Environmental Principles for Sustainable Fisheries Management in the Great Lakes Basin. The Council of Lake Committees formally adopted that earlier this month, and it's posted on the CLC's homepage within the Fishery Commission's webpage here at this location. And I want to just quickly go through the premise of these environmental principles. The idea is that there will be sustainable fisheries across the basin if a few of these principles are followed. That functional habitats are protected or improved in each lake through systematic, adaptive, cumulative, and collaborative approaches that accommodate fishery value into decision making to act on those manageable stresses. And important in that is the idea that protection is the very first thing that you have to do. You have to protect the really good habitat. But then also the idea of restoration and enhancement. And I'm not going to go into any more detail on that because you're going to see this more than once today, I suspect. So the last part of the talk here is how do we link environmental principles to advice? I think it's first of all important to recognize that the Council of Lake Committees has written this in a very strategic sense as it stands. They're a basin-wide construct, and as a result, this links well into the context of Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement basin-wide planning. At the same time, the Council recognizes that the next steps are for the lake committees now to develop environmental principles in more detail within each lake. And so the lake committees will need to identify key functional habitats for fish production. What are the environmental issues that impede achievement of fish community objectives by impairing habitat function? Where are then those priority management areas to address these issues? And I think the CLC envisions that a lot of this work is going to be done by the technical committees, recognizing that there's lake committee oversight, review, and adoption along the way. The vision, too, is that there's going to be a short list of priorities within each lake where progress can be made on a 5 to 10 year schedule, and the CLC desires that this would be complete by October 2017. Lastly, this process then allows for the lake committees an opportunity to provide advice to what the plan calls as applicators. The idea that on a lake-wide basis, the lake committees can talk about lake-wide management through the Water Quality Agreement's LAMP lake-wide management or lake partnership process. They can interface with coastal zone programs in their jurisdiction. They can participate in the Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative, allow them to help prioritize funding decisions as research and other proposals come in various groups, and to work with municipalities and landowners. So that's a quick summary. It should set the stage for the rest of the talks today, and I thank you all for the opportunity to introduce the concept to you. So with that, thank you, Mr. Vick.